You used to stop at every. You used to. Yep. Used to stop at every station. Late night when you need that fuel. Stop at every station. Late night when you need that fuel. And you know when that gaslight ding, that could only mean one thing. You know when that gaslight ding, that could only mean one thing. Ever since I left the city, ooh, searching for that diesel number 2 now. Knowing that B20 should be left out. Next gas in 40 miles got me stressed out. But ever since the S&B, ooh, started stopping less and going out more. 47 gallons under our floor, hanging around in places we ain't seen before.
Drake, please collab. What is up, my dudes and dudettes? We are back. Behind that camera is Colleen, and I am the hostess with the mostest on the leftist coastest, Todd. If you are new here, we make these excessively thorough videos of us converting this 2022 Sprinter cargo van you see behind me here into the ultimate adventure vehicle on wheels. Let's go ahead and talk about this gigantic thing standing next to me here. This is the S&B 47-gallon tank. It's going to be replacing the stock 24-gallon tank we have here. It will almost double our range and allow us to fill up in the cheaper states because, let's face it, California gas prices suck. I'm looking at you, Newsom. Anyways, that about covers it. Let's go ahead and get this installed. Anytime I'm dealing with disconnecting things, especially electrical things in the van, I like to disconnect the battery. I've covered this before, and on new Sprinters, there's a nice little disconnect in the driver's side footwell. Now we can move on to the first major step, dropping the stock tank. To do this, you'll need to first remove the filler neck cover. There are 4 T30 Torx screws holding it in place, and the door kind of gets in the way too, so you'll need to close it slightly to wiggle this thing out. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Yay! Then there's one more T30 Torx screw holding on the filler neck. I found I need an extension on my drill bit to get out this one, but if you're using a hand driver, you should be fine. Then heading under the van, there's this styrofoam bumper locator or guide. I don't really know what to call it, but this piece needs to come out. It was a little bit more difficult on my van since I have the hydronic lines. With the foam out of the way, you'll be able to access and disconnect the grounding wire Spade connector. It simply pulls apart. Then I tucked the van side of that connector up and out of the way. There are a few more connections we need to take care of. First being the electrical connector from the sending unit. There's a zip tie that needs to be cut, and then the connector itself has a small clip that you need to push down to remove. I regretted cutting my nails right before the filming of this video because it's a itty bitty teeny tiny teensy weensy whittle wever. Once that's disconnected, you can temporarily tuck it up and out of the way because now we need to disconnect the fuel lines. This part can be a little messy, so it's dandy to have a bucket handy. You need to disconnect both the blue and white marked lines. To do this, there's a forked plastic clip that you squeeze and slide down. Once that's pulled down all the way, you can pull the connector off. Honestly, it took a bit more force than I originally thought, but if it seems stuck, make sure that forked plastic piece is all the way down because there's no forking way it's coming off with that engaged. I let those drip for a bit and then put a caulk saver over each fuel line on the van. This will keep them nice and clean and catch any additional drips. By the way, I wrote about 10 different jokes to drop in here, all of which unfortunately couldn't pass the wife's approval, so sorry folks, you'll have to use your own imagination for this one. With everything disconnected, it's time to drop the stock tank. I first removed the middle bracket using a cordless ratchet and an 11mm socket. This gave me a nice flat space to put a tubophore, official pronunciation there, to spread the load on the gas tank. I had quite a bit of gas left in my tank and it just felt wrong to drive around town to burn it. I raised the floor jack under the tank so there was pressure and removed the other two brackets. Since the tank was quite full and I was parked on a slight incline, I took a strap and wrapped it around the end of the tank so I could stabilize both the front and back of the tank while I slowly lowered it down. About halfway in, I realized there was simply too much fuel all rushing to the back of the tank, so I had to set some additional 2x4s under the back of the tank to re-level it out. I then loosened the clamp on the filler neck using a flathead screwdriver and slowly wriggled it free. I thought my bucket was in the right spot, and I also thought the tank angled upward would cause all the fuel to head to the back of it. But I was very, very wrong on both accounts. Oh well, no use crying over spilt diesel. On the very dimly lit bright side, the cardboard I put down caught most of it. With the filler neck out of the way, I dropped the tank a little more and rotated the flex hose upward, cleaning everything off with a shop rag. When I was delighted that the diesel drops had discontinued their delicate dying dainty dripping, I removed the tank completely from underneath the van. I guess now would be a good time to say thanks for your service and all those close calls almost running out of fuel out there, old sport. We have the OEM tank pulled out here. It came out pretty easily, all things considered. I would definitely recommend draining the fuel tank lower than I had it, which was about 10 gallons. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier, if you have an auxiliary heater like a D2 or a D5 like the ones we have in our van, you also need to disconnect the fitting from the aux tap. Again, covered with the caulk savers, and again, wife's still not approving any jokes here. A little perspective here, that cute little tank in the back is the stock fuel tank, and this massive black stallion of a chunk of 1/4 inch molded high-density cross-linked polyethylene is the S&B. It's huge. The first component in this parts swapapalooza is the sending unit, which first you need to remove the lock ring. You guys have no idea how hard it was for me not to get the actual tool for this. Just find something flat to smack it with, they said. Well, it took 3 different things, but ultimately the chunk of aluminum did the trick. I'll link the real tool below if you're not feeling like smacking it is how you'd like to take care of it. Anyways, with the unlocked ring, you can unclip the hoses and the sending unit lifts out. It will be full of fuel, so to not spill it everywhere, you'll need to harness your full focus to flawlessly finesse the float free from the fissure so that it's flat from formation to finale to fend off the fumes of a frightening and foul fuel flood. Friends. Since September 2023, S&B started shipping all Sprinter tanks with a new fuel float. It's longer so that it goes all the way to the top of the tank and starts to drop as soon as the tank level drops. If you want your fuel gauge to work correctly, you'll need to replace this float. This was actually one of the worst parts of this project because the entire time removing and installing the new float, I thought for sure I was going to break the little plastic arm it attaches to. I used a small flathead screwdriver to pry out the old one and then a bar of aluminum to push the new one in. The problem is this arm sits so close to the fuel sender cup you can't really get behind it to stabilize it while you're pushing the new one in. If I were to do this again, I would definitely find something to put behind that arm while pushing. It felt like the entire time I was teetering on the precipice of having to call the parts department at my dealership again, which depending on your parts department can be hell in and of itself. Before you send it and install the sender in the S&B fuel tank, don't forget to add the brand new O-ring they sent along in the box. The sender goes in the S&B tank the same way it came out of the OEM one. This is the front of the tank here. There's this little arrow here. I don't know what it is for. Maybe it's pointing this out. But you can see there's this plastic wedge here on the fuel sender that goes in between these two things so that it can set down. It's like a little cocked sideways here, and then that will allow you to tighten the ring. Oh, we need to go clockwise. There's one more super important thing that needs to be checked before reinstalling the lock ring. Using a 4mm hex bit, you'll want to remove the vent. You'll want to peer down in that opening and make sure the pickup tube isn't crossed over the float. This would be very bad, as the float would actually have to be called a sink in that case. Let's leave that joke in that hole and seal it up with the vent never to be uttered again. Now we can resecure the lock ring, this time pounding it in the clockwise direction. I wonder what we'd call this direction if clocks didn't exist. Anyways, you'll smack this little disc until the black tabs reach the end of the slot and the indent makes it over the ridge, locking it in place. Then the hoses and wires can get clipped back to the tank. And then we can transfer the main vent from the stock tank to our new beautiful big tank, taking care to align it with the provided slot and clipping it into place. Next is the filler hose, using a flathead screwdriver to remove the band clamp. On the S&B tank, the check valve needs to be installed in the filler hose. It's super important that the flow direction is pointed into the tank. You will not be able to fill your tank if you do not put this in correctly. It does take a bit of force, but make sure to shove the hose all the way on, pushing the check valve into the filler hose and then retightening the hose clamp. Next, we reinstalled the filler neck into the filler hose and retightened that hose clamp as well. The filler neck is a bit heavy, so we used a 2x4 to support it while we installed the included vent hose to the Y fitting and zip tied things into place with the included zip ties. The vent hose itself follows the filler neck up and zip ties into place there as well. Now let's get this thing put into the van. The first step in this part of the process is to mount the plus nuts for the additional tank strap. I held the tank strap up on the cross member to identify the correct holes and then put marine grade anti-seize in each of these holes, actually choosing the incorrect one first. The nice thing is the plus nuts will only fit in the correct holes anyway, so it's pretty hard to make a mistake here. I used a cordless socket driver, the tool they provide, and an adjustable wrench to set them. Then I slid the tank under the van using pieces of the massive cardboard box it was shipped in to keep it off the cement. I fished the filler neck back up into its rightful home and started getting the floor jack ready to lift everything up and into position. You'll want to check the filler neck from above to make sure it and the vent tube won't catch anything when you go to lift. I then raised the tank about 80% of the way up, just high enough that it was supported horizontally in the corresponding cavity. This is when I actually found out that I needed to relocate my little S-Bar D2 diesel pump, which was right in the way now because this gigantic new tank extends so much further forward when compared to the stock original. With that little baby out of the way, we can start connecting things back up, starting with the electrical connection to the tank. Then I connected the white fuel return line, followed by the auxiliary tap, which we added for our diesel heaters, and finally the most messy connection of all, the blue fuel send line. I made sure to wipe everything down with an isopropyl coated shop rag once it was all said and done. This is where I relocated our S-Bar D2 pump, and I'm just going to have to follow the fuel lines back and then cross over the van on its original path. I tidied everything up with a Thomas & Betts stainless tang zip tie. It's my favorite kind lately. Alright, this is the very back of the tank. There's this little vent. This actually needs to go up through that hole in the frame member, which comes across to that hole there and then connects to that barb fitting there. That was a pain to get through there, but we got it, so continuing on. Then I took the tank to 100% lifted of course. I did a quick once over checking all the connections and everything I've added to the underside of the van, diesel heaters, water lines, electrical cables, L-track brackets, etc. were free and clear from the tank and not pinched or hindered in any regard. Then I simply strapped it in using the new provided mounting straps, 2 extra bolts, and the original 6 bolts from the factory tank. The closest call was actually our S-Bar D5 setup, but everything did fit, barely. I ended up rotating this cable clamp later to avoid rubbing. Then I reinstalled the filler mounting screw, dropping it down in the van only once, and then I put the cover back on the same exact way it came off. I then went back under the van for about the 4,532nd time of the day to reconnect the tank ground spade connector and reinstall the foam. Because now we have that tank vent hose that is attached to the filler neck, we had to notch the foam a little bit for clearance on the top here. And here's everything reinstalled. The spade connector is jammed up behind this foam and the wire slid into one of those holding slots and the vent hose fits the notch perfectly. Now it's time to filler up Buttercup. I originally started transferring the diesel from the stock tank to a gas can, but then I was like, what the heck am I doing, man? Why don't I just go directly from one tank to the other? So that's what I did using this handy little electronic filler pump. All right, here is the moment of truth. Will the van start? Oh, I guess I gotta reconnect the battery. Battery reconnected. And now, will the van start? Started right up. Well, my friends, that wraps up another video in the Adventure Van build series. We hope that you enjoyed it. We are really loving this tank. It is so nice to be able to go further and fill up less often. Overall, this project is definitely DIY beginner friendly, especially if you have another set of hands. That's the hardest part, is lifting these big heavy things in and out from underneath the van by yourself, but I was able to do it no problem. The total cost of this project, it's kind of expensive. The tank is $1,500, but it's by far one of my favorite upgrades for the van so far. I can't tell you how nice it is to avoid that range anxiety and be able to go these distances in this van, especially now that diesel number 2 is getting harder and harder to come by in some of these liberal states. I'm only joking. Anyways, the total time, it took me about a half a day with filming, so you could probably knock this out in 4 hours, no problem. Definitely not that bad. If you like what we are doing, please give us a thumbs up. It really, really does help us out. If you have any questions or comments on anything you've seen in this video, drop those down below. I respond to each and every one. If you're thinking about buying this or any of the tools that we use in any of our videos, please use the links below. They do not cost you nothing, but we get a small commission that helps us keep making this content for you guys. And as always, on your way down there, don't forget to slap that subscribe button. I'm getting out from underneath this van, and we will see you next time. Is Colleen, and I am always here. You are. Extra hands to help you out. There's a spider right here. That's kind of creepy. Whoa!